What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Franchise Tag. Today, we're doing our final review show. We're looking at the AFC East and NFC East. So for anyone watching this video version on our YouTube, you're probably thinking Fred looks much younger now and he's had a shave. Andrew's become a Scouser, and, well, Adam is still Adam.
Still here, yeah, still here.
Same hairline, though. Just throwing it out there.
So yeah, Adam and Gareth, thanks for joining. It's 7 days to go until the season. So how you both doing? How you feeling? This time next week, I'm sure the Dominoes will be in and the nachos will be ready.
Confident going into a new season, but when isn't an Eagles fan confident going into a new season? That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. What do you want me to talk about? Packers. They're gonna be fine. It's all gonna be good.
We can save it for. Well, it's a good time to plug next week's show, obviously. So we have next week we'll be doing our preview show for the Thursday night football games throughout the season, and excitingly we'll have both of you on to talk Eagles and Packers. But I guess that ties us in well to starting off with that division. Gareth, just how good do you think this Eagles roster is? And I guess also curious to know that if you don't win the Super Bowl this year, how do you think that ends for Sirianni? I know obviously you haven't got your Mystic Meg globe right now, but tell us how you're feeling about the season.
So Howie has done his usual thing. Howie has gone around, seen exactly what we needed and plugged those gaps. How he manipulates the cap, I think, is second to none in the NFL. The fact that our roster is packed offensively, I think it's safe to say we've gone from being a team that initially when Sirianni came in, we were a defensive focused team that keep the scores low and then just scoring points over the line. I think those days with the offense we've got set up this year is ridiculous. The fact that we've got first round pick running back in Barkley, we've got AJ Brown, Smith, Dotson just come in this week. Offensively, they are looking ridiculous this year. Combine that with an O-line, which, yes, we've lost Kelsey, and that is a huge miss, but we've been training the likes of Cam Jurgens for the last few years to try and fill that void. I don't think Kelsey retires if he doesn't think the O-line's set up to go again. You've got these stalwarts on either end. You've got Lane Johnson. You've got Jordan Mailata, who also got paid this offseason. It is a hell of a roster that Howie Roseman's put together. The only reason we don't win the NFC East and potentially go all the way to the Super Bowl this year is down to Mr. Motivator, the mascot of the team, Nick Sirianni. I don't know what else he does. I can't honestly point. He doesn't call the plays on offense. He doesn't call defense. I actually don't know what he does other than basically be a cheerleader in the corner and create memes. From what I've seen, you look at the whole roster, even defensively, we knew last year our weakest area by country mile was at the corners. Yes, Bradbury's there, but unfortunately he's had an injury that's going to put him out for a while. But both the corners we wanted fell to us in the first and second round this year because of all the offensive weapons that came off the table. How do you get both Mitchell and DeJean? I do not know without doing much wizardry. So that was incredible to see. And then you look at the fact we brought back Garner Johnson. You got Devin White coming in. It's stacked both ends. And I can't see anything but the NFC East crown going to Philadelphia this season and keeping the streak alive.
Adam, do you feel this? I feel Gareth did, was pretty unbiased there actually. Because I do agree with most. No, but I do agree with most of what he's saying. Like, I know there was the issue of the Eagles falling off at the end of last year and hurts his shoulder. He needs to stay healthy. But do you feel like this is, a Philly bounce back year? And are you as confident, as more of a neutral? Do you see the strengths that he talked about?
Yeah, I'd be surprised if they didn't win this one. It's not just about the Eagles improving, which they have. It's also about the other teams, which we'll talk about in a minute, maybe sort of like decreasing as well. So I think that's a genuine concern for the other teams. Last year, I think that the Eagles, it was clear that they were very, very good on the offense. Defense was where they struggled. You could score on them over the top. It was very much the corners that was the issue. that was really dealt with incredibly well in the draft, as Gareth has already said. Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean are both really good corners that came out this year's draft. I think they'll do really well. Not just that, they brought in some other guys on the defense as well, because I think the one thing that we kind of have to give them a little bit of time when it comes to the defense. I think it's something that it's not necessarily going to happen straight away first week. I think that is going to be a potential concern for them. You know, at the end of the day, these guys are still rookies. You've got a new guy as edge rusher in Bryce Huff, who I think could have a really good season, but it might take a little bit of time. And obviously, you've got a new defensive coordinator in Vic Fangio, where historically it's taken a bit of time as well in most of his jobs in order for it to work. So I think that is probably the weakness of the Eagles at the moment, is that bit. The offense, as has already been mentioned, incredibly good offense with Saquon Barkley, with AJ Brown, with Devonta Smith. These guys are great. Hurts has shown how good he can be as well. I personally think they have improved, but not a lot. I think they've improved slightly because I think the offense was very, very good anyway. I think it's just they've sort of maneuvered it a little bit so that they've got the running back who's a little bit higher quality than before. For me, I think they've got a ceiling of 12 or 13 wins this year. I think they could really do that. And if they do come out winning 12, then I think they've won this division fairly comfortably.
And you also throw in the fact with the new offensive coordinator this year, who obviously is well known for his style of play, loving to throw the ball down the field, which I know has not necessarily always been Jalen's strength. But when he has had to do it in games where he has had to go like for like, he went like for like with Patrick Mahomes in a game where he had to throw the ball a lot. And that was another problem with the offense last year. We had all this talent, all this capability, but the play calling was ridiculously predictable. I think there was one game, I think I called 3 plays for the Eagles in a row what they were going to do. And me sat on my couch, having never played the game, can work it out. I think defensive coordinators of many years' experience will work it out even quicker. It was just so predictable what we were going to do time and time again. Whereas this year, I can't see that happening.
Well, hopefully you don't get a repeat of the, if you remember, Gareth, 2011 season, Michael Vick. That was quite a star-studded team, and I think it was 8-8. But no, I don't see that either. But moving on to, well, I'm saying because I know what's coming. I know you're going to say Sky's second team, the Cowboys. Here we go. I'm not as big this season on them. I think they missed their window last year. I think that was especially in the manner that they lost to the Packers at home. Not saying they're not going to be competitive. I guess, Adam, to flip the question that I sort of asked Gareth about the Eagles, you know, we've seen Colin Cowherd say recently or over the summer that, you know, Bill Belichick could potentially be coming in the door next season. I would say there's 3 teams tonight he's been linked with, the Eagles, Cowboys and Bills. But do you see that pressure on Mike McCarthy? Because we know they've just gone and had to sign Dalvin Cook the other day. Yes, they've tied down Ceedee Lamb, but I feel like there's not as much optimism as there was going into the 2023 season. So, what do Cowboys have to look forward to, and what do you make of their chances? Yeah,
it's a difficult one, isn't it, for the Cowboys? Mike McCarthy's in his last year, isn't he, this year? So it's it all feels a little bit strange. I mean, the Ceedee Lamb news, that obviously the new deal, I think, is kind of the only real positive that they've got to hold on to this offseason. It hasn't really been that great. There's still a lot of question marks over Dak still, whether that's going to happen or not. I mean, we spoke about it on Tuesday night on the chat show, and we were talking about it. And, you know, I mean, what do they do? And it kind of almost feels like they've put themselves in a corner where they almost have to sign him, because if they don't, then they're giving away a fairly good quarterback who I know some people call a bit of a stats padder, but he does. You know, he does okay and he gets them to the playoffs. So it is difficult situation that they found themselves in. I didn't really like their draft picks that much, to be brutally honest. I wasn't a massive fan on Tyler Guyton O-line. I felt like it was, of all the O-line guys, and there were a lot of O-line guys in this year's draft, he was one that isn't really ready to go now, and it kind of feels like that they should be a team that are ready to go now. So that kind of felt a little bit strange. And then I just kind of felt like, where's the wide receiver in that draft class? That they didn't go down that route. And it is Ceedee Lamb, but when you start looking at the rest, I mean, yes, you've got Brandon Cooks, but it's not really the sort of guy that you're going to be desperate to like hang your hat on. So that kind of felt a little bit strange to me. And then they have lost some really key pieces. Tyron Smith, their left tackle, has gone. Stephon Gilmore played quite a lot of snaps for them last year. Van Der Esch has gone as well. Tony Pollard has gone over to the Titans. So there's a lot of guys that have gone, and it feels like they haven't replaced adequately. It didn't really feel like they brought in many additions this year. So, yeah, it's a bit of a negative spin on it this year for the Cowboys, I think. And when, Jerry Jones comes out and goes that they're all in, it feels like the actions are very much different to the words. And the likes of Zeke and Dalvin Cook are not really, I can't imagine they're really getting the juices flowing for the Cowboy fans. So, yeah, I mean, I've got a ceiling of 10, and that's if everything goes great and it's very much Lamb and Prescott doing their thing like they did last year. But I think they're gonna struggle to get up to 10. I think. I think that's if everything goes perfectly well for them.
Yeah, interestingly, I had my ceiling at 10 for them as well. So, Gareth, I'm curious if you had the same, because, they are your biggest rivals. I know you like to like they are still a good team. There's no doubting what they did in the regular season. But even for me, who was sat here last year saying they were going to win the division, I know we were a bit like, really? Even I'm now looking at it like, no, they've not got a chance. They could be a wild card team. But, as an Eagles fan, I guess you're probably you're not as scared as you would have been, say, at the back end of last season of them now.
No, I'm not. I said this season I'm not as scared of them, because traditionally if Dak has to throw the ball more, they're usually a team that relies on a good running back room. So the stats, I think there's some ridiculous stats on if Dak has to throw a really high percentage in games, they traditionally lose, which I know that is often due to them being behind and needing to score touchdowns, which obviously pads those stats out. But when your running back room is Zeke, Cook, is it Rico Dowdle and a few other players that no one really knows who they are, and then they're a Ceedee Lamb injury away, from literally having next to no offense. Don't get me wrong, big fan of Ferguson, the tight end. I think he is solid. I felt dirty trying to do a trade deal to try and get that tight end in a fantasy league this year, but I do rate him. But I also think that he's going to be important for them this year. And then you throw in the fact that you've got Dak, who's on a deal chasing year, where he's not only showing to the Cowboys what he's got, which adds even more pressure, but also to other teams out there, the likes of the Raiders, who are teams who are desperate for a quarterback. And I think when you look at their opening as well, their opening few games are not easy. So obviously they open up against the Browns, and then they play New Orleans, they play the Ravens, the Giants, which is an easy win, and there's Pittsburgh, and then they've got Detroit going into their bye week. That is not an easy start to the season. But how many playoff teams have I just mentioned from last season in that mix?
Do you know what? I know I said the same about the Giants the year before. I actually did go back and look at the schedules, and the Cowboys one I wouldn't say was, I know people said it easy, but I would be unfair to sit here and say it wasn't. You do look at it and go, well, yeah, this year is a lot harder. They won't collapse the way the Giants did, but I think that's a completely valid point.
And then they come after the bye, and then they're playing the 49ers in San Francisco, which is a notorious safe place for them to play. What's the average points that 49ers put on them in those games? Jeez. So I actually had them at 11 wins, so I don't get why the Eagles fans are the most optimistic for them this season, which is concerning. I've got them 11 wins, because the 11-12 wins is what standard Dallas. 11-12 wins, blow it in the playoffs. It's literally the hallmark of them. But it is going to be a lot tougher for them this year.
Well, I guess just one thing to finish on Dallas, and you can give me a yes or no quickly, is with McCarthy and Prescott, if they don't, let's say, make an NFC championship game, do you see one or both being replaced, either new head coach and or new quarterback?
I think
know it's
McCarthy.
early, but...
I think McCarthy will be gone. Whatever. I think there will be a change at that, because if you don't get, they want to win, don't they? If that's kind of the outlook for that team. So I feel like if McCarthy will definitely be gone. As I said about Dak, I think they've put themselves in a position where they can't get away from it now. I think it's almost like they're going to have to sign him. So it's going to be very difficult to give up a guy who is clearly a very capable starting quarterback in the NFL. He just isn't maybe like Patrick Mahomes capable. That's the difference. But yeah, I think that's going to be tough to throw him away.
And isn't a 40 million cap hit if they do throw him away or something ridiculous? Because haven't they loaded his contract right at the end? So it's like a huge cap hit at the end there, which kind of says you've got to pay him because you're spending that money anyway. And then just to let him walk, bearing in mind, they can't trade him because he has a no trade clause. Trey Lance, who some people are on about saying could take the job, showed in a preseason game why he shouldn't get the job. And then what's it? Cooper Rush then next? And they're going to, either way, they're going to be a team that's going to be towards the latter half of they'll be towards the latter end of the draft anyway. So they're not going to get a QB in the first round of any note. So it's almost like you have to pay him, or you do something silly this offseason and basically write off next year, which I'm not against them doing. I'm really not against Dallas writing off next year. If anything, I encourage it.
No, I agree. He's been franchise tagged twice. I think it was twice in a row, so they can't do that. And there's the no trade clause, so it's a bit weird. But
they've got a no tag clause as well. There's a no tag clause as well. I'm pretty sure there's a no tag and no trade clause. He's got both in his contract.
You can't do it 3 times, so they've done it twice. So obviously that's why you were saying about the hit. But I guess do you know what? I was going to go to the Commanders, but I think we should continue with the misery, especially when Andrew watches this back, and talk about the Giants. I don't even know where to start with them. Like, I went into some deep dive of, Sky loves a stat, but these are my own stats, by the way, Adam. So there's 88 active quarterbacks at the moment in the NFL, right? Of those, 30 have played 50 or more games. Daniel Jones has won 23 in 61. The only 2 quarterbacks who have a worse winning percentage than him there's Sam Darnold, and the other name has now gone from my list, but that's obviously doesn't bode well. Even your likes of Case Keenum has won more games, Mariota, Carson Wentz, Jameis Winston, Tyrod Taylor. I said this to you off air last week. I think he's one of the worst starting quarterbacks I've seen in the last 10 or 15 years. He's hiding behind this. Like, we know about the stats on the receiver side, how they haven't put up any good numbers since Odell Beckham. Like, what does Brian Daboll do? And either of you can go first, but I just have they've lost Barkley, and I know people say, yes, you can reset. They've drafted Malik Neighbors. I am a big fan of him, but I'm sure Adam's going to mention, yes, Brian Burns has been brought in. They've got Dexter Lawrence. There is a pass rush, but I just don't see any positivity. So for the Giants fans out there, go.
Thank you.
Do you want to save the Giants?
You've given me such an envious task here, haven't you? The one thing I know is they do have a decent pass rush, and Brian Burns will be a good addition for that. So I think in that respect that it's not all doom and gloom there. They went 6-11 last year. If you look at the stats, they were worse than what that record was. It wasn't great. They were pretty lucky to get the 6 wins that they did get. So it wasn't great, and they've lost players that I would class as captains. They've lost Saquon, which is a huge loss on the offense. They've lost Xavier McKinney to my Packers, which again is another huge loss on the defense. They didn't really re-sign many people. I like the fact they brought Brian Burns in. I thought John Runyon was okay for the Packers. I think he'll do all right at left guard for them, so he's okay. Devin Singletary, although he's not Barkley by any stretch of the imagination, he is a serviceable running back who can do okay. He did all right for the Texans last year, so you could argue that he will do all right. And I did like the draft. I thought the draft that they had was good. Obviously, as you said, Malik Neighbors, great wide receiver. Andre Phillips, I like the corner. They took him round 3 out of Kentucky. He is a little bit small, but he has got loads of energy, and I think that he'll do really well. Theo Johnson is a really good tight end coming out of Penn State. I think he will be he's not a blocking tight end, but he's very athletic, so I think he'll be all right. The overall sort of feeling that I got when you go through everything is that this is clearly a coaching staff and a team in general that is looking towards 2025. This isn't about 2024. And Daniel Jones is just going to be there for this year, and then they will move off of him because
for sure.
it's easier for them to move off of him after this year than it was last year. And that's basically what it's going to be. So I wouldn't expect a great deal out of them. I think if everything goes amazing, maybe 8. I'll give them 8 as a potential, but that's really pushing it. I think you're probably looking more at 6 and 11 again, personally. And yeah, it's about them getting younger and hopefully moving on to next year and being able to get in a quarterback and then develop them and hopefully do better in time.
If they win more than 6 games, I will wear an Eli Manning jersey.
I look forward to that now. We look forward to seeing you in the Eli Manning jersey.
I'd have to be drunk for sure, but
I tell you what, Andrew Manning will have the Eli Manning jersey for you.
Eli Manning helmet. So you can wear the helmet as well. You can wear the helmet if you like. That would be good, wouldn't it?
Gareth, we won't talk about me dressing up in NFL gear. We'll save that for next week. But you know, you've watched Brian Daboll now for a couple of seasons, obviously as an Eagles fan. How do you feel about him as a head coach? Like Adam said, it is a rebuild, but do you think he's the man to lead the rebuild for them?
100% he is. Like, you look at that first season he had, though they had no right to make the playoffs that year, and he got them there. Don't get me wrong, it was a good year for Barkley. He was fairly injury free, and Daniel Jones, I think, was on a contract year, so he played quite well that year. I do think this year, actually, their O-line will be better. I quite like Jermaine Illuminor on the edge as well. Not just because he represents Britain as well, and a good guy, but he's also a lot stronger than what they had there last year. I think that their O-line will look stronger, which should give Daniel Jones a bit more time in the pocket to throw an interception. But I think that they will be better. But Daboll is definitely the man to take them forward. I think that he almost gets a free pass due to how bad things have been set up for him. Like, how do you drop Barkley? Like, how do you drop that with Barkley, how they did? And why do you pay Daniel Jones instead of Barkley in the first place? Like, who made that move? And then if it doesn't work,
that last season, sorry.
And then not only that, if Daniel Jones doesn't do great, your backup is Drew Lock, who's also a interesting quarterback. And then if all falls down, it's Danny DeVito. I mean, Tommy DeVito. It's not a good QB room. It's not a QB room that you want to be putting your hopes and dreams on. But Daboll as a coach, I've got no qualms with it. I personally think he's a very, very good astute coach, and I think that he is someone who they need to keep around for a bit longer.
Before we move on to the Commanders, I was just wondering if obviously I always say we don't want anyone to be injured, but if they did get down to Danny DeVito, I wonder if he has it written in his contract that he can't be in New York because of Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Well, maybe he's not allowed to rock up in a Giants.
He fired that agent as well that looked like a weird
monster.
And he fired him as well. He got too big. He got too big for that guy.
Was going on or something. Yeah, something was happening.
He looked like Inspector Gadget with the hat and all that kind of stuff. It was just a weird look.
If the Giants get to 8 wins, it will be Eli Manning's jersey, the helmet, and the mobster hat on top. That will be
that'll be a look. It's got to be worn to a London game, that, on it. That sounds next year, the following year. But yeah.
I feel like the laugh has set us up well for a positive. I feel like with the Commanders. I'm intrigued to pick Adam in particular's brain over Jayden Daniels, but Gareth more for like the coaching side again. You know, what do you think a successful season looks like for Dan Quinn? I mean, other than them failing to the Packers in the playoffs, like we said, he did get a lot out of that Cowboys defensive unit, and I think he earned another shot at a head coaching gig. So it'd be intriguing to see, obviously, how he does. Now he's sort of steering the ship again. Do you think he's a good hire? What do you make of Washington going into the season?
To be fair, I think he's a great hire. I think as well, he's brought players with him that he knows. He's brought with him, is it Dante Fowler from the Cowboys, who's a player that he knows quite well. He wasn't a bad head coach last time he was a head coach, and I think he kind of just run out of steam where he was. So I think that reset in Dallas has really helped him. I think that they've built an interesting roster. I'm quite worried about their wide receiver room now they got rid of Dotson. The fact they've got Zacchaeus as a wide receiver too, and I watched him play for the Eagles last year. He is not a wide receiver too. Speed merchant who struggles to break free of cornerbacks and then catch the ball. So I do worry about the wide receiver room. Having traded Dotson, that trade just didn't make any sense to myself. But Dan Quinn as a head coach is a guy who I have a lot of belief in. I think that he is the right guy to take that football team moving forward, and a very astute hire.
And then Adam, obviously, I touched upon Jayden Daniels. I mean, their O-line was awful last year. I even regrettably do you know what? I stick by this. On TalkSport last year around Thanksgiving, I was saying about Sam Howell, and I didn't think he was bad. I thought it was the Washington O-line. But there's no doubting that, obviously, Jayden Daniels is more of a playmaker. He's got more ceiling. You know, how do you see it sort of going for him? Is he going to have because they've made an effort to improve the O-line. Do you think he's in a better position than Sam Howell was?
Yeah, slightly. I think the O-line has improved. I don't think it's improved massively, but I do think it has improved. I think that Daniels, you know, we've seen in just the small clips that he's had during preseason that he's got the ability to rush. I mean, but he isn't just a rusher. He's got a hell of an arm on him as well that we saw at LSU last year. You know, he's a very good quarterback. The concern for Jayden Daniels is if he gets hit too much. It feels a bit Anthony Richardson like, but the problem is that he's about 40 pounds lighter than Anthony Richardson. So it's like if he really does get hit, then he could be in trouble. Whereas for obviously for Richardson, that's not so much. Look, they're in a big rebuild. They blew up the season, didn't they? Mid-season last year, they got rid of Chase Young and Montez Sweat. So the defense was really rough, and the offense wasn't much better, to be honest. So it's one of them things where I think they're in a full rebuild. They've got, you know, Dan Quinn, as Gareth said, he did really well with the Falcons. Like you say, it did kind of just sort of reach a point where there wasn't much left there for him to do there. Cliff Kingsbury obviously has come in as OC. We know what he was like with Kyler Murray. So he's got a history of these type of quarterbacks. So I think that because of that, the relationship with him and Jayden Daniels will probably work quite well. And they've made some good moves. I thought their draft was really good. I mean, Johnny Newton is a great inside defensive lineman out of Illinois. We were all surprised when we were doing the draft show that he dropped into round 2, but it turned out that he actually had some injuries, so that was kind of something that we didn't know about. Mike Sandstrom out of Michigan at corner, really good corner, did really well for the champions there. I really like Ben Sinnott at tight end. I think he's going to have a really good season from day one. He really reminds me of Laporta. He's got that body type and that kind of receiving ability. I don't think he'll be breaking records like Laporta, but I think that he definitely has the ability there. And I mean, they brought in a lot of players. They brought in 20 new players all in, and there's a lot of experience there, especially on the defense. Players like Jeremy Chin, Frankie Louvu, Bobby Wagner's come in. You know, so they're definitely better than last year. Last year they only won 4 games. I think if it all goes according to plan, they could win 8. I really think they've got a chance of pushing on here. I think that it's unlikely that they get to 8, but they can definitely show big signs of improvement under the first year with Dan Quinn. And I think that they've got a, they're not going to upset anyone. They're not going to be upsetting the Eagles or even the Cowboys in this division, I wouldn't say. But I think that they're definitely they're in the steps in the right direction. New coach, new GM, new ownership. So it's positive things for them.
They've also got some very winnable games on that schedule because they've obviously got the Tennessee Titans in there. You look at they've obviously played the Giants twice. They're playing the Panthers. You've got the likes of the Cardinals. They've got the New Orleans Saints. You've got Tampa Bay. So you've got some of the NFC South teams that. Do you know what I mean? So there's quite a few winnable games there. So 8 or 9 is doable. If they got 9 wins this season, that'll be a hell of a first year for Daniels and also for Quinn. That'd be a hell of a first season, particularly as I say with that wide receiver room where it literally is just like Scary Terry and that is it. They have had to say some really good experience. Austin Eckler's not a bad running back to be adding into your running back room. They've got obviously the old hand in Zach Ertz at tight end again, which is a guy that is fairly dependable, a player that obviously I'm always going to have a bit of a soft spot for. They have had some really good experience, and as I say, that schedule has a lot of teams that are winnable. Like if you've got a close game against they play Pittsburgh at home. Like I know the Steelers, they're not going to be relying on a heavy scoring offense. So if you can win a close game versus them, and obviously you've got the likes of the Bears, which is a lot of optimism about the Bears at the moment, but we've seen that before with the Bears where we go into a season with this high on the Bears and then the true Bears usually resurface. So there is a real chance that they can get to nine wins this season. Again, why am I being positive about a rival in this division? What is going on today?
When you said the Bears, I don't know why I had if you come out of the woods today, but I won't start singing that. But hopefully Jayden Daniels and the Commanders can come out of the blocks and start the season hot. We'll quickly, before we move on to the AFC East, run through the order. I've gone Eagles, Cowboys, Commanders, Giants. How do you guys see it? Is there any difference between that order?
Zero difference. That is the order happening this year.
Yeah, well, I agree.
Nice for us to all agree. Now we can move over to the East. So we'll start with the Bills. I did text, for anyone listening, I did text Adam privately and say I was the most excited. Well, it's quite ironic actually. We know the Patriots are the worst team in this division, but I'm the most excited to talk about this division because I think it's the hardest to predict, up there with the AFC North. Adam, I feel like there's this running theme with the Bills now. They've been bounced out of the playoffs 2 years in a row now in the divisional rounds. Obviously, that loss to the Chiefs was painful, given that they were at home. It was almost supposed to be that moment of like the Chiefs were at their weakest, they're vulnerable. That was their game to win, and they didn't. So, Stephon Diggs has moved on. Do you see still optimism of? Is their Super Bowl window still open? Because Sean McDermott's another guy, like I mentioned at the beginning, he could be on the hot seat. So what does a good season look like for Buffalo and for him?
I think that a good season for them is probably doing what they did last year, to be honest. I think the 11-6 that they got last year.
Even divisional round. Do you think that's acceptable?
I think it's going to have to be for them to a certain degree. I mean, I personally think that if you've got a quarterback like Josh Allen, then your Super Bowl window is always open. But there is a big but to that, and the fact is that the team are just not quite at the point where they were before. It feels like they've lost some key pieces. As you said, Stephon Diggs has gone, Gabe Davis has gone as your wide receivers. You've brought in Curtis Samuel, Mac Hollins, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and Keon Coleman. It feels almost like you've gone for quantity rather than quality there, and that's kind of like I think Keon Coleman could be a really good wide receiver, but the other guys are a bit not fantastic, and so that's kind of a concern. You've lost Shaq Lawson, you've lost Leonard Floyd, edge rusher. you brought in. I mean, you re-signed AJ Epinesa. You brought in Dewon Smoot from the Jags. Again, it kind of feels almost like the quality is kind of not quite what it was. So that's kind of the concern with the Bills a little bit. I think they've brought in some good players. Like I say, Keon Coleman's good. Ray Davis, running back, really liked him out of Kentucky. I think that he could be a nice sort of 1-2 punch with James Cook that could be quite interesting. I think the plan will be to run the ball quite a lot. I think that's kind of what their MO is going to be in this one. I think they had quite a few losses on the team when it comes to the players, but they didn't go backwards too much. I think 11-6 and basically getting to where they got to last year is a realistic aim for them, and I don't think you can really expect too much more.
I'm looking forward to the end where we rank them, because I have a feeling there will be a difference. But Gareth, I mean, Adam touched upon it there. I feel like the highlights of last season were James Cook developed as a running back. We know Dalton Kincaid is talented. Yeah. Shakir, I thought he was great towards the end of the year. Like, that's a really good addition. And when Adam was saying then about quantity, it feels like they've gone for that old Patriots approach, or what the Chiefs done when Tyreek Hill went, of just getting guys in and being like, we know Josh Allen's got a rocket arm. We know he could put the ball in the right places. Let's just stack our team with cheaper receivers. But do you think that they've got enough to, we know they probably should make the playoffs regardless, but it is still that question mark of going far in the postseason.
See, I know obviously Adam was talking about Curtis Samuel. I actually quite like Curtis Samuel as a wide receiver. Yeah. I think he's good serviceable, and you got to remember as well, he's not exactly had good quarterback play around in the last few years. So it'll be interesting to see what he does with actually a capable quarterback. And obviously the other problem you do have with Josh Allen is, yes, he gets you shed loads of touchdowns, but then he also turns the ball over an awful lot as well. So you get that double-edged sword with him a little bit. I do think that they will be fairly similar to last year, mainly because of the division, I think, as well. I think that you do have probably the worst team in the AFC in the division. Sorry, Sky. But I think you have got the worst team in the AFC in the division this year, which that's 2 wins there. I do worry a little bit about the fact they're playing Nicholas Morrow as a linebacker, because I watched him quite a lot last season. And he was not great. His tackling was particularly poor in the open field last year. So I would worry about him being someone you rely on in that position. But overall, they'd be same when you got Josh Allen there. They'd be fairly standard. He'll find someone open, and you just hope it's not Valdez-Scantling to drop it.
Yeah. Should we get my Patriots out of the way? Because this is
would be delightful.
Like in my head. I just look. We know it's not. We know it's a rebuild. Obviously, Jerome Mayo's in there. I've got my Jerome Mayo jersey on. Not that he's watching, but if he is, he was a great linebacker, and I'm excited for him. And I think he's got a bit of a harsh time with the rankings. I know he hasn't proved anything, but obviously they put him quite low, and I think in the bottom 3. I just feel like, do you think? I'll let Adam go for this one. Do you think he's capable of modernizing the Patriots? And when I mean modernize, I mean obviously Jacoby Brissett was announced as a starter earlier today. But Drake May, for me, you'll know better than me, but for what I watched their games in particular, North Carolina, because I thought we drafted him. And they didn't particularly have a great supporting cast or a great O-line. So he's actually walking into quite a similar situation in New England. So do you think that, A, benching him was good, and B, is Mayo the guy who can modernize these young guys and develop a roster?
I think Mayo has shown that he can kind of like, maybe that he can sort of like be able to communicate and deal with younger players maybe a little bit better than what Belichick maybe was come the end of his career. I think that is something that is going to stand him in good stead to have a good chance of succeeding. I think he's going to be able to be a bit more of a man management type of guy than and do things with that. The defense was decent last year. You know, you can't really completely go in on the Patriots as being really awful, despite the 4-13 record. But it's about whether they can get any form of offense going. That's the real issue for the Patriots. And I think this year, as you say, it's clearly a rebuild. It's clearly about seeing what they can do with these new players. I mean, you've got Jalen Polk, you've got Javon Baker. They're kind of like the two wide receivers that obviously have come in through the draft. Jacoby Brissett, I think, is a very good bridge quarterback. I think that's probably the best way to describe him. And he's someone that is going to be able to do quite a bit at the beginning of the season to help the wide receivers get involved in the games a lot more. But I think eventually you will see Drake May come in and take over that job. I don't quite know how long it's going to be, but I think that it will happen probably in the first half of the season, I think, because May has shown signs of improvement already just from the pre-season games. So you kind of feel like it would be a little bit remiss not to give him enough time. I mean, like I say, it's all about development and it's all about seeing how they do. So yeah, I mean, I actually think they're better off this year than what they were last year. I think the clear out was needed. They needed a fresh approach to it a little bit, because when Tom Brady went, it kind of felt like you were just trying to keep it going, but not to do. It just didn't really work. So yeah, I think having a clear out and a completely fresh approach and a rebuild is probably the way forward for them. I like Jaheim Bell as well. You got him in the 7th round. He's a really good value, tight end out of Florida State. So he's another one that I think you did quite well. But yeah, much better off. Still a very long way off, but on the baby steps.
I like what you said about Polk, because Polk, like, obviously Brissett hurt his shoulder in the last preseason game, and I don't know.
Yeah,
stayed up till 3-4 watching the preseason game, but like you said, Drake May come in and he had the rushing touchdown against the Eagles, but he was still a bit off with some complete. But he just seemed to grow every week. So you hope maybe by the London game, or by week 8, maybe he's in. And then it's gets to watch a bit of tape and learn from Brissett. And I was going to say, Gareth, I saw you nodding along when Adam said about him being the perfect bridge guy. Do you think that was a smart move to bring in that quarterback who's going to actually, not a lot of quarterbacks are happy to mentor young guys. I don't think people talk about that enough. But it seems like the Patriots have done
a few times as well, though, hasn't he? He's done it a few times as well. It's not his first time being the babysitter, in effect. And it's not just one young quarterback he's got there. You've also got Milton there as well, who I think is actually a very good quarterback as well. So it's an interesting one. You've got basically a guy who's quite good at having that shepherding role. He's always been quite serviceable. He's never been spectacular, but he always does a job. He's always been that QB that you know what you're going to get. A bit like how it was discussed last week about Minshew. You always know what you're going to get on Minshew. Brissett to say. He's never going to be spectacular, but he works hard and plays hard and is willing to give his all. So he's a good player all around. I do actually have a question for yourself, obviously, Sky, because it's going to be an interesting one for you. How much of a loss do you think it is you losing Judon from that defence this year? Because it is a big player to lose.
Mayo tried to channel. I think he tried to channel his inner Belichick in that you get rid of him a year early. People forget that he was injured, obviously, for a big chunk of last season. I know he was fantastic the year prior to that. But it was the right time to to get I know people it's only a 3rd rounder. I mean, that's going to be our way to rebuilding is through the draft in the next couple of years. So you still got Dietrich Wise, there's still a couple of decent players who are good up front, who can develop there. So I'm it's one of those, it's the same way that when I read the Brissett news earlier, you kind of go, I want to see the young guys start, and you go, there's a plan. You see the trade news happen, you go, we've lost Judon, but you're like, it makes sense. It makes business sense. So, I've got my GM cap on tonight. Look at me being rational.
Like it.
I appreciate you both being not too horrible on the Patriots, and I won't be too horrible on the Dolphins. But let's move on to them. I mean, the only thing I would say is that Mike McDaniel now looks like a drug kingpin, and for queuing up a pun, this team is built on speed. So, they've got Achan, they've got Tyreek Hill. Do we expect them, Gareth, to be as explosive as they were last season? I mean, how do you feel about two as one of
They'll be
those
the
guys?
same.
Yeah, do you think they'll be the same? At home,
Yeah,
amazing. On the road, nothing.
yeah, they'll be the same. They'll come against someone good and not do great. Like it's the default way, because they'll try to do all this really smart, clever stuff, which works versus, no offense, the Patriots and other teams that are struggling. But when they come up against someone who's good, it just won't happen. Like, if they obviously they're playing against this season, I think they play against Green Bay. I can't see Green Bay not coming in there and steamrolling them, just because of the fact that they try all this really lovely motion stuff and it looks lovely and all the rest of it. But yeah, they'll be flashy, they'll score lots of points, they'll be great players to have for fantasy purposes. But when it comes to crunch time, they just will do what the Dolphins have always done, and that is not get over the line. I know it's short and sweet, that, but they're fairly predictable, I think, at this point.
It's like you're reading my notes, because you set me up perfectly here. I was going to ask Adam, I think the general consensus with the Dolphins is this team is just not built for the playoffs. We saw that last year when they went to Arrowhead. I know they had a few injuries on the O-line, which obviously didn't set Tua up for success in that game, but it just feels like this team is, like I'm seeing in pre-season, like free motions, and I'm thinking, is Mike McDaniel gone mad? Like, it's a bit early for that. Like, it just feels like this team is, capable of a playoff berth, but they're just not built to go deep unless they had home field advantage.
Yeah, I think the home field advantage is a massive thing for them, isn't it? Because we've worked out that Dolphins don't like the cold. That seems to be how it works now. So
they love the cold. That's what they were saying last year. They love the cold.
Water all the time, Dolphins.
They said last year how much they loved the freezing cold at Buffalo. Do you not remember them like going out in t-shirts and stuff trying to claim this? Like,
I don't think it worked very well. I actually think they are worse off than what they were last year. The reason I'm saying this is they've lost Christian Wilkins, which is a massive loss on their inside defensive line. They've lost Robert Hunt as well at guard. I think that's a huge loss for them. So this is a real problem. They lost a lot of guys on that defense, and they were not the best defense anyway. So there's a lot of guys that have gone. They have replaced or tried to replace, but they have replaced with guys that I would say are not as good as what they were. They've brought in Jordan Poyer. They've brought in Kendall Fuller. These guys are good, but then I know it's different positions, but they're not of the same quality as Christian Wilkins or Robert Hunt. And it kind of just feels a little bit like they've kind of just dropped down a little bit when it comes to that. The draft was strange, to say the least. It felt like it was very much speed. That was all that we were going for. When you look at Chop Robinson, the reason that he got drafted was because of his speed and his agility. Jalen Wright, it's all about him in the pass catching game and his speed. Mohamed Kamara was drafted, who I actually quite liked. He went round 5 from Colorado, but again, it's about speed and aggression rather than being the quality, so much quality and any sort of finesse. It's kind of like that all goes out the window. It's all about speed, and these players that they brought in haven't really fixed the major issues that they have from all of the guys that they lost. So I do think that is a problem. As Gareth said, it is kind of like, especially the offense, it does kind of feel like it is just going to be the same as what it was last year. It's very much about getting the ball out as quickly as possible, going to Tyreek first, going to Jalen Waddle. They've re-signed Raheem Mostert, so obviously he will probably go again as he did last year. But on the whole, I think they're just a slightly poorer team than what they were last year, purely because of losing the quality of Christian Wilkins and Robert Hunt. I think if everything goes amazingly well for them and they literally get everything, the offense just blitzes everyone that they can play, I think you're probably looking at 10 or 11 wins. And as you say, it feels like they're very much a team that once it reaches the playoffs and the business end of it, that speed tends to not be a difference maker quite so much. And I think that's going to be their problem.
AFC Cowboys is what they are when it comes to the playoffs.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
But somehow worse. I mean, I know they were the only team, I think, in the Belichick era to get the to get an AFC title. Like they got that title was in the Brady Belichick era. I mean, when we had Matt Castle that year. But I'm glad that you guys are not confident in them because I don't like them. And most Patriots fans don't like the Jets or the Bills, but I don't like them because they always bang on about that undefeated season. They pop their champagne every year when, no one else can do it. But really, they've been irrelevant for about 40 years anyway. So let's hope that continues. Moving on to a team that also has been quite irrelevant, but I'm actually weirdly excited to talk about them. And I've purposely kept them till last because I find them to be one of the most intriguing teams going into this season. The Jets and Aaron Rodgers. Is this the year, Adam, that they finally make some noise? They've got the defense. They've got Garrett Wilson. Do you know what? I'm not even going to go through the list of players because I bet you all the things you're going to say are what's in my head right now. Like, is this the year if he can stay healthy? Have they got a shot?
Well, the fact that they went 7-10 with Zach Wilson and I think it was Mike White, I think were their quarterbacks last year.
In a bit, yeah.
So I think the fact that goes to show how good that defense really is, and how much they can really be a difference maker in most games. Not only that, they've actually improved a little bit on the defense as well. I know they've lost Bryce Huff. He's gone to the Eagles, as we said earlier, but they've brought in Javon Kinlaw, who I think is going to be a good difference maker for them on the defense as well. Help me out with Hassan Reddick. What the hell's going on now? Is he going to like?
He's requested a trade. They've said no.
He's gone mad,
there's rumours. There's rumours that Howie Roseman's circling around again. But wouldn't it just be Howie that just to come back and offer him a lower pick and then pay him the money in the first place? There's all that rumours coming around. Obviously, if he plays, he's a difference maker. He is a sack machine.
But he only got traded in April, right? Like he literally got traded. Yeah, and what I'm like, okay,
for a third round pick.
Conditional third round. He wants to try and make the Jets again. So yeah, he's obviously playing double agent.
So yeah, I mean, if he plays as well, that's going to be great for their defense, and it's just going to make them even stronger than what they already are. You have to think logically that Aaron Rodgers coming back, even at his age and coming off of the ACL injury, you have to think it's going to be an improvement on Zach Wilson and Mike White. So because of that, like you say, you've got the wide receiver in Garrett Wilson, who's really good. They've brought in Mike Williams, who, again, another receiver who struggled with injuries, but you got to think is probably going to do reasonably okay with them. The ghost of Alan Lazard is still there, I believe. So there are some guys that they've got there, and then they've got one of the best running backs in the whole league with Brutal, who is insane. And like you say, and they've got a great defense with Rodgers there. You have to think it's going to be a much better offense than what it was last year. They're pretty solid on special teams as well. They've got it pretty much ticked across the whole board. I've got them as a ceiling of 11. I think that they definitely can be a playoff team. And with a defense like this, it's always going to give them a chance in any playoff game as to see how far, they could go quite far if Rodgers is, back to how he was before the injury.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing I was going to mention, and Gareth just said this will help follow on to that, they've O-line, they've got Tyron Smith's come in, Morgan Morsis drafted Olufashinu. The front office has clearly gone, right, we lost Rodgers to injury. It was a bit of a freak injury, for that to happen in 6 snaps. But surely it doesn't happen again. We know Robert Saleh's actually a good. He kind of had the reputation of just being like a motivator, but now I think we actually view him as a competent head coach who's actually built this roster up. So surely this is their time, right?
Yeah, and bearing in mind last year, as I say, Hall had a hell of a season with a bad O-line. Give him a competent O-line. My word, his stats could be ridiculous this season. And as you mentioned, Fashanu, I really like him. Great tackle. If Smith can stay healthy again, he's a great player for that position. So they're going to be better from that side of the ball when it comes to the O-line, because I don't think they could have been much worse than what they were at that point last year. And I actually quite like the running backs they also drafted this year. But I think both of them are going to learn quite a lot. So it could be an interesting running back room this year with some of the players they've brought in with Allen and Davies. I think they're both very capable. And it's going to be interesting to see whether Aaron Rodgers will mentor Jordan Travis as well, to see.
Yeah.
Because Aaron Rodgers is notorious a bit. They say that, but then he was all right last year with a certain quarterback who does not get named in New York anymore. But notoriously, he hasn't been great at that mentorship role. So you do wonder whether he will be that better mentor this time round. So I don't think they can be much worse O-line than last year. They've definitely improved across the board there. So keeping him upright and healthy is key, particularly in those playoff games where you sometimes need that Hail Mary attempt. And who's better at those in his career than Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, well, I was just thinking about. I made that. Do you know why? You took me to a flashback. I fell asleep in that one at Ford Field, and I woke up to two of my mates going mad. It was to the other Rodgers, the tight end, if I remember.
Yeah,
and I remember waking up, and I was like, "Oh, I've missed it," and I was like, "Oh, I've bloody missed one of the greatest plays you'll ever see." But no, I'm almost weirdly like invested in the Jets. Like I almost kind of want them to do well. There's
an odd stat about the Jets, though, isn't there? They are the 5th most successful team at AFC East wins in the division, which is weird in a 4-team division. How they can be 5th? It's a weird stat that they are somehow 5th, which I think is a brilliant stat at the same point. So you kind of want to see them actually win one, because you know what, they need to be 4th at least.
Yeah, we want them to do well because they're coming to London as well. We want that. We want an ultimate revenge game of seeing Ghost Sam Darnold versus the Jets and Rodgers. And to wrap it up with the divisions on this side, I have them winning it. The 11 wins that you mentioned there, I see the Jets winning it. I'd go Bill second. Completely agree with what we've both, what you both said and what we were saying about the Dolphins regressing. I still see them with a winning record, but I put them in 3rd. And then unfortunately, but it's fine. All year you'll hear me say it's a rebuild. 4th this year is fine for us. How do you guys see it?
You want to say something?
I like the Bills to take it again. I think that the fact that you've got Josh Allen there is going to be enough to get them over the line when it comes to. I think it'll be very close between them and the Jets. I've got them 2 as the top 2. Dolphins not that far behind, and then Patriots quite a distance behind, I'm afraid.
Ooh.
So I will join you at this point, and it always makes me worry when I'm about to say I agree with Sky on something, but I actually think the Jets could do it this time round. Like, Sky's notorious for his very bad takes on and the Premier League at this point.
He's a brilliant gambler as well, isn't he? So he does well at that.
I said Baker Mayfield would be great, and I said the Cowboys would win the East. I'm hanging my hat on those 2. So I'm hanging my hat on the Jets. That's not great.
So yeah, I think the Jets can do it this year. I think that if Aaron Rodgers is 50% of Aaron Rodgers of the past, they will have enough there with the way their defense plays. He's not going to have to rack up massive stats and massive points a game. So that's what I think you need to be aware. I think that they can win close games. And if you got a quarterback on the last drive of the game to win a game, there's not many quarterbacks out there in the history of the game you would place a bet on more than Aaron Rodgers. So I think they're going to win a lot of tight games. I don't think they're going to be spectacular points-wise, but I can see them winning enough to win the tight division. Then Buffalo, then our choke merchants in Miami. I'm never getting a guess from there now, am I, for our chat show? And then finally, New England by a considerable margin. But on a positive, they're going to get a top 3 pick.
My last question is: who gets more wins, the Patriots or the Giants?
Giants.
Yeah, Giants.
Ooh.
Giants not even going to be close. I think that, yeah. Sorry, Sky. I think that I've got you down as 3 wins.
Bloody hell! It'll be a long season for me.
Yeah, so I've got you 3 wins. Myself,
I'll
but
get to
then
watching college football again. Then I'll start draft scouting already. Then
yeah, it's going to be a long year, I'm afraid, based on what I'm predicting. But anyway,
No.
could be worse.
It is what it is. Well, appreciate you both joining. It was great to obviously talk through those last set of divisions, and next week we'll get into the swing of things again. So if you made it this far, obviously it's good to highlight that by next Tuesday, I think we're looking at doing a show where we'll go through all of our predictions for the year in terms of MVP, etc., as like one final preview. And then obviously, as I mentioned at the beginning, we'll have the new preview show to come before I was going to call it the sexy doubleheader. I've said sexy again, Adam. Same as last week, it was sexy tight ends, and next week it's a sexy doubleheader. We've got the Ravens and Chiefs, and then we've got the Eagles and Packers. So, yeah, until then, stay tuned for plenty more content, and we'll see you next week.